Unprecedented. We are now hurtling towards a time that is unprecedented, and we are doing it unprepared. Welcome to Law and Society, and let's talk about it. Please subscribe and let's talk about it. Well, after the election, obviously it wasn't the result that I wanted, but we have to accept the result that we have. We had an idea, and I talked about it many times of what it was going to be. And it is turning out to be exactly that sort of a cabinet that Donald Trump is trying to build, which is a loyalist cabinet that doesn't have any other mooring but loyalty to Donald Trump. And I wanted to, like what I was thinking about uh, today when I wanted to talk to y'all is, I think that we are all demoralized. Those of us who didn't want this outcome, and as the days move on, as we get into Donald Trump's second term, we are going to see how much we didn't want to be where we are. And but that shouldn't really keep us from doing what we need to do to keep our republic, which is to speak out, which is to talk about what you feel is relevant and important. And even if you're doing it in the void of the internet, even if you're just recording it for time, for the preservation, for the ethnography from your perspective of what is happening, I feel that I have a duty to come and talk about it. So as we walk into this reality TV presidency 2.0, and in this one, fealty is required. You get to see Donald Trump picking people like Matt Gaetz, Pete Hegseth, and now Matt Gaetz is gone, and now he has been replaced by Pam Bondi, who was the Attorney General of Florida, or currently is or was, and is a Trump loyalist and had a part to play in the 2020 election conspiracy big lie that the election was rigged. And she has been placed as uh, AG designate. And on the Hegseth, people like Hegseth, now there's talk that Donald Trump wants to replace Hegseth with somebody like Ron DeSantis or Joni Ernst, who I think is the senator from Iowa, and another senator, Senator Haggerty, and I don't know what state he's from, but those are all better choices than Hegseth, which brings me to the point that he wants to get the public outrage out of the way with these completely unqualified people like Gates and Hegseth, so he can sneak in equally maybe relatively qualified, but who are equally loyal to Donald Trump and are equally dangerous to the rule of law and our democracy. And why do I say rule of law and democracy? Because the people who are appointed to these cabinet positions are in charge of major departments of government that governs over everything from defense to intelligence to the interior to energy to education to uh, the EPA administrator to the FBI director, to the CIA director. The idea of nominating Kash Patel and thinking that Kash Patel, who printed a book where he was the supposed a children's book that sort of mythologized the 2020 election and how it was rigged against Donald Trump. And somebody like that who doesn't have any specific law enforcement example. He's been in scattered positions. He's never been in an appointed position. He has been in scattered positions throughout defense and uh, I think as a federal prosecutor, or may have been a prosecutor on behalf of Congress. I think Devin Nunes, but no FBI experience, no intelligence gathering experience. And I think that soon somebody is going, we're going to get to um, uh, Cash Patel not being viable. And then we're going to get somebody else who is relatively qualified, but still doesn't really rise up to even the level of Christopher Wray, who happens to be Donald Trump's own nominee, by the way, who still has 3 years left on his term to be FBI director. So Donald Trump is sort of breaking precedents over and over again because FBI directors have 10-year terms, and there's a certain independence of the FBI director that has always been in the history of the FBI, kind of what separated within the executive branch and made the FBI independent and the AG neutral. But with Pam Bundy as AG designate, and anybody from Hegseth to Ron DeSantis to Joni Ernst, they are all MAGA loyalists and may be more qualified and more bureaucratically able than Hegseth, who is a complete wreck of a man to this day, has alcoholism issues with, denigrating women, objectifying women, and treating them as possessions, a very sort of toxic masculinity, alpha male stereotype. And that's what he's pushing forward. But then he's going to get an equally unqualified but relatively qualified person to go in and become that designate. So I'm waiting for who he replaces Hegseth with. I'm waiting for who he replaces Kash Patel with. A lot of the ones I don't think he's going to replace, like Durham. Was it Durham? Or Burgum, whatever his name is. He's a governor from um, a red state that I can barely recall right now. Then we have Kristi Noem, who is the DHS secretary, who is the governor of South Dakota, who cruelly killed one of her pets. And I can't really see what kind of an experience she has of being the head of the Department of Homeland Security, being the governor of South Dakota. But okay, she's a governor, she has executive authority, experience, and that gives, okay. And then you get like Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. Yeah, that will that's okay, fine. I mean, I don't know how much experience he has in whether he's a career diplomat like Anthony Blinken, who has been the Secretary of State for 4 years, or whether he's somebody who is good like Colin Powell, who will go out and do the job of the people. We don't know that. We'll have to see, but he's a loyalist. He's a Donald Trump loyalist, and we're seeing this purely transactional experience, the presidency emerging, where he has appointed his own children's fathers-in-law as ambassadors and envoys, where he has placed billionaires on different, I think, Secretary of Navy and other places that they're just utterly unqualified to be. But then he's named a good Secretary of Labor. So it's all over the place. There's an overwhelming push for hardcore loyalists in the law enforcement departments and in the intelligence departments. Now, how do you get Tulsi Gabbard, somebody who is clearly not only unqualified, but should be positively disqualified from being director of national intelligence, when she's had tea with dictator Assad and visited Moscow and peddles Kremlin talking points on a regular basis. How are you going to get that person to consolidate all of the intelligence and present it to the president every single day and not taint it by your perception of what the truth is, which is not the truth? Russia is not a friend of the United States. They wouldn't have called in 60 plus bomb threats across the country in Democratic precincts if they had been. We're not going to talk more about Russia because it's a waste of time unless it is completely acknowledged that they have been playing a part in our elections since 2016, 2015, and they're probably going to play a part in the foreseeable future. We're just going to have to, you know, get over the fact that we are walking into a loyalist autocratic presidency where a president has never ever been this powerful thanks to the Supreme Court's Trump versus United States ruling, who is going to be our own mad crybaby God King. And we are going to have to deal with that. We're going to have to be the guardrails of that. We're going to have to be, we have to be outraged when outrage is required, not displace our outrage. When you have Donald Trump having promised to pardon insurrectionists, who continues to call insurrectionists hostages, and I believe that he will pardon many of those January 6th defendants, and I don't know how many, but I believe that he will. And if he gets to pardoning seditious conspiracy convicts, then that raises another question of Donald Trump saying, yeah, I helped them. Yeah, they helped me on January 6th, 2021, and I'm helping them now by giving them a pardon. If that, that's what that would be like. To me, that's what that would sound like. And we have to acknowledge that this loyalist government that Donald Trump is building around himself has people like Russell Vought, who one of the architects of Project 2025, who talks about a post-constitutional order, who talks about, essentially culling of civil servants and putting in loyalists who will essentially bring to life what is the unitary executive theory, where all the power rests in the president, executive power. And so that takes away the independence of the FBI and all of the intelligence agencies. It takes away the neutrality of the DOJ. It takes away the law and order of our country. And Donald Trump is promising to do that. And we should have no illusions about it. And nor should we be distracted by Joe Biden pardoning Hunter Biden. Then Donald Trump pardoned his daughter's father-in-law, Charles Kushner. And it's not the first time that a president has pardoned a family member. And we know for a fact that had Joe Biden not been president, nobody would be going after Hunter Biden. That Hunter Biden was given a chance of a plea deal where there was outrage from the GOP, and therefore that plea deal was rescinded. So it wasn't a normal case. And what's most important here that I want to get out is that the pardon power is a plenary power of the President of the United States. It's explicitly stated in Article 2 of the Constitution of the United States, and there is no limit on it. It is not reviewable. And if you look at Trump versus United States, that bestows immunity that is nowhere in the Constitution, that ruling, the Supreme Court says that those core powers like pardons and appointments, you can't question the president. You may not like it and you want to talk about its political or moral implications, but there's really nothing you can do about it. So let's talk about what's coming that's going to sort of change how the federal government operates. And if Donald Trump is given the leeway of molding the FBI and making it a loyalist partisan organization, he can go after private citizens and make their life hell by nothing but just opening investigations. We're going to see so much transaction that has happened of people in places of power who have given to the Trump campaign. We're seeing billionaires do that at the moment. We're seeing Elon Musk being the poster child of that at the moment. A building of an oligarchy, a presidency with a cabinet that has billionaires in it, many, many billionaires in it, and a quid pro quo presidency where you can do whatever you want as long as you give Donald Trump enough money so he can puts you in a position of power. And then doesn't matter what happens to that department or that law that creates that department, whether that be education or defense or interior, whatever it is, or DHS. You're not giving it to people who will restore those institutions or reform them. You're giving it to people who are going to be figureheads and allow you to cull the system, fill them with loyalists, and change the rule of law by changing those agencies' missions in a way that Supreme Court has already given a red light in Loper Bright by overturning the Chevron doctrine that gave these agencies some independence of interpreting the regulations. But now the courts can do it. And Donald Trump is going to further deregulate it. So there's really nothing to many of these institutions like the EPA. If you have RFK Jr. as the Secretary of Health and Human Services, that's going to have problems with the CDC and other institutions that deal with Americans' health and human services. So we are walking into a jarring environment where we are going to have to look at the truth. We're going to have to weaponize the truth and go and defend our democracy. Remember, you need weapons to defend as well. These are defensive measures of knowing what the Constitution says, of knowing that, don't talk about pardons. There's nothing we can talk about it. Talk about the incoming administration, who Donald is trying to bring in, who President to be Trump is trying to bring in, and how much of a sort of monarchy, hegemonic autocracy it is versus a democratic state or democratic government. And I think that's important. I think it's important to restore some level of checks and balances by the Senate saying, no, we're not going to adjourn. We're going to see through that the right candidates get through and become cabinet secretaries. There's really no way of avoiding the fact that they're going to be Trump loyalists, but they're going to be better than what has been thrown at us so far. Many of them are fine, but most of them who deal with homeland security and national intelligence, those are just, and defense, those are just so off base. An FBI director and HHS secretary, those are just so um, out outrageous that perhaps Donald is giving us a gift by pushing senators. So what you can do now, substantively, is call your senators, Democratic senators, if you have them, and tell them to push their GOP colleagues to not even bring it to the vote and send out the message that these particular candidates, like Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard and Hegseth and who else? I mean, those another one, Tulsi Gabbard and Hegseth. Gates is gone. Um, Tulsi Gabbard, I'm blanking at the moment, but there are several. RFK Jr. You have Christine Nome. These are some really not savory characters, and we have to ask ourselves: is that what we want? But I think the critical ones are FBI director, Department of Defense, and ODNI. Those are national security. So Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, those cannot be accepted. Those are not acceptable. RFK Jr. is also not acceptable, but to a lesser extent. But I mean, it's difficult to say to how much to a lesser extent. But I mean, the urgency is there to think about RFK Jr. as well. It's just as bad. If you're anti-vax and whatnot, we're in a mess, and that's why I'm sounding like a mess because I wrote this thing out in front of me, and then I was like hearing all of this news coming out, and it's all so twisted and warped. And you have like Merrick Garland urging career prosecutors to stay when we are seeing that Donald Trump is picking somebody like Russell Vought who wants to cull agencies, and Kash Patel who wants to do away with people who are career professionals who have been on the job. They don't want to deal with that bullshit. So they are leaving. And Merrick Garland is the last person to tell them to go because, yeah, he had a late nomination. And, I was all about him for a very long time. But he should have started Donald Trump's investigation on the day that he got into that office instead of delaying and delaying and delaying. I swear to God, every single day after Merrick Garland was confirmed, I was like, okay, maybe today's the day he's going to announce the investigation. Maybe today's the day that he's going to come, and it happened in such a sluggish pace. And he doesn't have the right now to tell career prosecutors to retire and save themselves the culling of the herd that's coming. Like, I keep getting all this news coming in. And this is a really difficult time, but I believe that we as a country need to process it as fast as we can and get to a place where we understand that we're walking into perhaps an American history that we have never seen before. It's going to be written in the ugliness of mass deportations and the ugliness of mass outrage because of price fluctuations and market fluctuations and recurring instability in our government and resultantly our society. Don't be surprised if you see militarization of the country by nationalizing the National Guard. Don't be alarmed by it. Know your rights. Stay safe, but prepare for the worst. Whether that be start saving money now, conserve as much as you can. Prices will go up or down. You don't know where it's going to go. The problem is it's unprecedented. we don't know where we are headed. We truly do not know. We cannot compare it to any presidency. We cannot compare it to any sort of oligarchical uh, type that I had that we've had before. I mean, because we haven't had an oligarchy to the extent that we'll have in less than 2 months. So I think it's important that we focus on the urgencies and identify the news that shouldn't really be scandalized, and you should really waste your time on it. And also take a lot of the news that's coming out with other news and multiple sources before you come to a conclusion or an assessment of what these people are who Donald Trump wants to bring to power and what the agenda is of such a loyalist sort of uh, monarchy like presidency, and that and what that tells about our legacy. Last thing, excuse me. The last thing I want to say is, um, South Korea had a crisis where you had South Korean president declaring martial law, and then uh, within hours of it, the parliament overruled that martial law, and you know, it was within a day. And in 4 years, our country couldn't hold accountable somebody who had an insurrection, didn't declare martial law, but incited an insurrection. And we couldn't get in 4 years that person to justice. I expect that in South Korea now, the president will be held accountable for what he's done, whether that is legal or not. What happened, I don't know how it works in South Korea, but we'll see it happening at a faster pace because they got through their own president's martial law within a few hours. And we couldn't adjudicate a former president's insurrection in 4 years. So that's a really sad comparison in similar circumstances of two democracies in the world, and South Korea being one that was nurtured and shaped by American foreign policy. It's a really, really interesting dynamic to see at this point. So, with that said, thank you so much. Hey, Satish, thank you for being here. If you have arrived late, you can go back and see what I'm talking about. It's more of a sort of a loose rant, I guess, because I had written up all about what I was going to talk about. But the point is, we don't have time to waste about being sort of demoralized or having our hope being lost, and really talk about the existential thing about, is life purely transactional, like all these things I was thinking about talking about. But the truth of the matter is, we're in a crunch time right now, so we need to process what we know. We need to be outraged by what should be, uh, we what should not be, and we need to speak truth to power, because the truth is what will set us free. And we need to learn how to weaponize the truth. Donald Trump and MAGA has weaponized disinformation. That's what Vladimir Putin did. That's what he does. That's what Donald Trump does. That's what corporate media frames the narrative. It's not really talking about, you know, what is necessary to talk about. And there's this void where the left uh, is afraid of going into independent journalism or listening to engaged citizens to get a gauge of what they're thinking. They're being told by corporate media, and even MSNBC is corporate media. The only morsel of any sort of good news that you may get, or bad news that you may get properly, comes from NPR or PBS. But the rest of it, we get some of it from the New York Times, but even there, it's sort of distorted. It's meant to create controversy. And that's not what journalism is about. Journalism is about speaking truth to power. It's about bringing up the injustices that are part of society that should not be. It's about speaking the truth. It's about empowering and amplifying those who speak the truth. It's not about sensationalization. And if it were to be sensationalization, then sensationalize the truth for God's sakes. So, with that said, thank you so much. And I'll talk to you soon. Take care.